students at the University of Missouri are turning up the heat in a confrontation over race on campus.
Systematic oppression is because you don't believe that you have the equal opportunity for success.
You don't believe?
A rampaging mob of race agitators ran off Mizzou's president after he refused to acknowledge his white male privilege.
I'm resigning as president of the University of Missouri system.
The resignation of Tim Wolf is a glimmer of hope for historically marginalized students whose voices have been silenced by patriarchal white male institutions.
And I know this is just like the beginning of it.
Just the beginning. Well, a compilation of events this week in Missouri leading to the resignation of University President Tim Wolf and the chancellor there. That's a great place to bring in our roundtable.
And joining us today, talk show host and political commentator Lisa Durden, also with us political and economic analyst and CEO of Gladius Consulting, Raul Mas. Thank you both for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So a lot has happened this week at the University of Missouri's campus, and students will say this is just the beginning, as you just heard. Lisa, what is your take on the events that are happening right now at Mizzou?
Well, I think that Tim Wolf did the exact right thing. And on top of that, I also think it was good that he said it was all of his fault and that's why he's resigning. He didn't do a lot of victim blaming, but a little bit, but I at least appreciated that he took responsibility. But I do think it was kind of a little too late, but better late than never, as they say. What he could have done was prevented that from boiling over if he had done something years and years and years ago, put some kind of systems in place to make sure that the culture there wasn't a racist culture, to ensure that all students on the campus felt safe and welcomed. But he just poo-pooed it away as if it was nothing big. And, you know, listen, I'm not shocked because people think, well, it's just a name or it's just this, but over a period of time, it can be rough. And people got angry at me because we were talking about Jews too. People are throwing around epithets with Jews and blacks and all kinds of minorities.
But these incidents are very narrow in scope, Lisa. There's you know, I can't say this for sure. I haven't been on the campus, but I read the reports. There are very few documented incidents of this type of racism on campus. Raul, what do you say?
Listen, whether there's a few or many, quite frankly, a few is unacceptable to begin with. But it seems to me that Mr. Wolf definitely had a problem with sort of crisis management. I mean, this is a problem that's been brewing for some time and apparently was not terribly effective at sort of nipping it in the bud. You know, look, the resignation of one individual, if in fact there is any sort of systemic racism, which as you just mentioned, is somewhat suspect because all we've heard so far is a series of sort of innuendos and sort of anecdotal evidence. What strikes me as odd is, a year ago in 2014, the University of Missouri was being hailed for having the first gay black athlete going into the NFL.
I made the exact same point, Raul. I made the exact same point a few moments ago. And it's not like we're talking about the Jim Crow South here on the University of Missouri campus. These are college students who have an opportunity to get a college degree from a prestigious university in the United States in 2015. And do the ends justify?
But does that give them, just because they're getting a good education, does it mean that they have to tolerate name-calling like that?
Correct.
But this was a hit job on the university president. He may have been ineffective. He may have had a hard time in crisis management. But, maybe he needed to go.
Well,
but this sends a message to college kids all over America who want to be involved in some sort of revolution is the word that they used.
There's
that all you have to do is stomp your feet
right.
and protest, and you're going to get the change that you want. That's not how you make effective change. This is not the civil disobedience of Martin Luther King.
Let me add one more thing.
Action is exactly how you make change. That's what I didn't agree with Tim about. He kept saying change is about listening and learning and caring and conversation. That's one small way to make change, but the best way to make change is to take action. So I disagree fully. And here's the situation. While I'm on a campus getting an education, I'm paying you to educate me. I'm not paying you to abuse me and bully me. And furthermore, it wasn't just about a football game. It was about the money that they lost behind them not playing those games.
It's always about the money.
Do you think that was
in your wallet?
Let's let Raul weigh in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Listen, I think my colleague is absolutely right. I mean, this is about money, okay? And when it's hard to feel sympathetic when you sort of sell your soul on the altar of NCAA football and take their dollars. then you basically subject yourself to something like this, where the players basically say, hey, you know what, we're not going to play anymore because we're offended, and the dollars suddenly stop flowing. Well, you know what? Those are the big boy rules decided to play with, and you're not exactly paying these athletes.
This is part and parcel of a much bigger problem on college campuses all over. A bunch of kids who have no real grasp on the real world and what it's like to deal with real adversity in their lives. And
I think some of those students did deal with it. I can't speak for all of those students, but I think some of those did. And I think other people just jumped on board.
But kids want to be a part of something, and when you're in college, you rarely have a real grasp on what it's like to deal with real adversity.
Why are we calling them kids? These are adults. These are 18 and over. These are not kids. These are grown people who are making these decisions to stand up, and I'm proud of them. Hashtag the struggle ain't over.
All right, fair enough, Lisa.
Durden, Raul Mas, stick around. Don't go away. We have plenty more to come. Coming up, we're going to discuss a decriminalization of marijuana and criminal justice reform. Is it all the same, or are Democrats just pandering to minority voters? Stay tuned to find out.
And you can stay with us. We'll be here late night tonight. We have plenty of material to work with from last night's late night talk shows. Headlines and punchlines also coming up very soon.
The time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
It's considered what's called a Schedule I drug, and you can't even do research in it. So I would like to move it from what's called Schedule I to Schedule II.
Democratic candidates Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are now battling over the issue of marijuana and its classification, as you heard, by the federal government. Let's bring back our roundtable.
Rejoining us again, talk show host and political commentator Lisa Durden, also with us, political and economic analyst, and the CEO of Gladius Consulting, Raul Mas. All right, the Democrats originally had their focus on reforming the criminal justice system, and now the two top candidates are talking about marijuana and reclassifying the drug. Lisa, is this really about criminal justice reform and overcrowding in our prisons, or is this more about trying to reach black voters on the issue of marijuana?
Why? We smoke more joints? Puff, puff, pass? I mean, what do you mean? What's race got to do with smoking a joint? Although I don't do it.
Well, I think
I do think. Go ahead.
You totally threw him off, Lisa. Totally. We're going to get into those stats in just a moment, but going back to the issue, do you think it has more to do with? Go ahead.
Yeah, I do think it's a little of both. But I will say this, that it's credible, because I think that if you decriminalize it, you will not have as many folks in jail or prison for selling illegal marijuana. I do think it goes hand in hand. But I do think there's a small element of the candidates pandering to the black community, but they should pander. I mean, you're running for a high office. Pander. What the hell?
So you're okay with the pandering. You don't think they should try to reach out to them on issues that might be more across the board, economic issues, how to help raise wages. They're trying to do that, but it seems like they've kind of taken this issue that is very popular with younger voters as well. Rand Paul's doing some of the same issues on the side, but they might be conflating the two, because I think the criminal justice issue and the fact that more black folks get arrested for marijuana charges than white folks do, even though they studies show that they both tend to smoke about the same.
Well, let's go to that, though. You're bringing in some of the research.
Well,
you brought it up, Lisa, so I want to bring that up. According to the American Civil Liberties Union, most recent data, blacks and whites use marijuana at comparable rates. Yet, blacks are more than 3.5 times more likely to be arrested. Iowa,
talk it, girl,
having the largest gap with more than an 8-point difference, and Hawaii the lowest with no difference. 22 states are over the U.S. average. So let's bring Raul into the conversation. You've been very patient with this. That presents the question to you. Do you think the Democrats are pandering?
Yeah, but I don't think they're necessarily pandering to blacks. I mean, I think, this is a race to sort of the lowest common denominator of the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, pot smokers, right? So if you're a pot smoking liberal Democrat, you're loving Bernie Sanders, and Hillary's playing catch up. And I think that's exactly what she's trying to do in this case. Look, at least Bernie has been consistent. He's always had that libertarian streak to him. But I think, Hillary is basically reaching here, and she's reaching to sort of capture those extreme sort of left wing of the party, of the Democratic Party, that are favoring Bernie Sanders. And, you know, she's kind of trying to straddle the middle ground here because she's saying she wants to reschedule it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2 because there's not enough research.
Right.
That's malarkey. I mean, there's been plenty of research in marijuana. A lot of it shows, quite frankly, that it's harmful to kids at all ages, quite frankly, and adults as well. But yet, you know, there is an element that is in favor of it. And like I said, at least Bernie's been consistent. He's got that libertarian streak in him. He always has. I think Hillary in this case is just jumping into the fray. I think criminal justice, quite frankly, at this point has nothing to do with it. It's pandering, but it's pandering to pot smokers across the board, not necessarily black or white.
And I think another problem
I happen to agree with that.
I think another issue here is
agree with that.
A lot of folks bring in this whole heroin epidemic that we have in this country right now as part of the rationale for softening approach when it comes to marijuana. But I think that's a mistake too because
I don't think most people are buying
two entirely separate issues.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you know,
unfortunately, I mean, I vacillate a little bit as to whether I would vote for the legalization of drugs on a recreational level, but I will say this: I dated a drug addict. Marijuana is a gateway to higher drugs. It just is. Not that everyone who smokes weed is going to go in that direction, but it is. There is lots of proof that this happens. However, alcohol is a gateway drug too.
Well, if you got an addictive personality, you have an addictive personality.
You do. Right.
You know.
Raul, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, boo. Thank you, boo.
Last word to you, 10 seconds.
No, listen, the heroin addiction problem, particularly in the Northeast of the United States, is huge. You know, in New England, in Vermont, New Hampshire, they're having a huge problem with that. And I agree with my guest. I mean, with my colleague. I mean, absolutely, marijuana is a gateway drug, but it also gets back to addictive personalities.
All right. Raul Mas, Lisa Durden, thank you both for joining us here on Newsmax Now. Great to have you. And I did know what you were referencing there. It was Friday, right, Lisa? I think it was. Anyway,
exactly.
I got it. He didn't get it, but I got it. There's still time to weigh in. Tell us what you think about the student protests that are over racial harassment at the University of Missouri. Your comments are coming up shortly. You can still comment at newsmax.com/comments or go to @newsmaxnow or facebook.com/newsmaxnow. We'll be right back.